Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us here on day one of South by Southwest London. I'm Anushka, I'm the founder of Naut and the co-founder of the London Space Network, and I also lead the Space Academic Network. Space, the next frontier, is a phrase we've all heard before, but in 2025, it carries a renewed urgency. We're in the midst of transformation. Reusable rockets, once the stuff of science fiction, are now routine. They've slashed the cost of getting to orbit and unlocked new possibilities, not just for mega constellations, but for global communications too. Earth observation, climate monitoring, and yes, alternative access to the International Space Station, as well as the rise we've seen in space tourism and private space missions bankrolled by private actors. On Thursday this week, we're due to have a lunar landing by a Japanese company called iSpace. It will be their second attempt. And this comes hot off the heels of Elon Musk's presentation on Friday about his plan to make life and access to space multiplanetary as part of SpaceX's plan to get us to Mars. These developments aren't just technical milestones. They're reshaping who gets to participate in the space economy. From biotech experiments in orbit to semiconductors manufactured in microgravity, space is becoming a lab, a factory, and a launch pad for exploration beyond our planet, to the moon, to Mars, to the moons of Jupiter, and far beyond. The innovation that comes from this advancement will touch every aspect here on life on Earth. South by Southwest has always been about what's next, and space is that next frontier, not only in 25, but next year and 50 years from now. It's no longer just about astronauts and rockets. It's about biotech, sustainability, global security, and industrial innovation. One of the hot topics in the UK is space domain awareness and ISAM, which is in-orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So if South by Southwest is about what's next in the frontier, with the launch costs dropping, the missions are more diverse, the opportunities are more open, so are the questions. So with that, the conversation today is about the people building bold ambition and solutions in orbit, on Earth and beyond, and what it really takes us to get there. I'm really delighted to have with me we're joined by two brilliant visionaries, Katie King, CEO of BioOrbit, developing pharmaceutical factories in orbit, and Bianca Cefalo, CEO of SpaceDots, building the first real-time space intelligence infrastructure. So let's begin. So I would love for the audience to hear about your vision and what you're building, because it's very rare for us to be in a room of non-space people. So let's give everyone in the audience an opportunity to see our world. For those less familiar with space tech, what do your companies do, and what makes space the right place to build your vision? Bianca, should I come to you first?
Absolutely. First of all, I'm delighted to be here and actually share this space, no pun intended, with you all. So what we're doing at SpaceDots, the idea that we have is pretty much the one of enabling, again, a multiplanetary species, but doing that in a way that is sustainable and safe. The first of what I used to say all the time about the space environments, every orbit in which you are going has their own threats and their own enemies. And these ones are pretty much underestimated or under-monitored or completely unknown. So if you think about actually bringing people on a lunar orbit or Mars, where you haven't really understood the radiation environment, humans are going to be pretty fried. So we definitely don't want that. So there is that vision of making sure that the environments are understood and monitored, and the intel of that environment is given to the engineers to be able to design, plan, and risk mitigate before that happens. But there's also a mission that is a lot closer to our home, really, which is the defense assets and really understanding threats coming from enemies that could completely shut down a military operation in a place that's really needed. And that's also coming from either a human-made or a natural threat in space. So that's what we monitor, that's what we see, and that's the intelligence that we give to the industry.
It couldn't be more timely today with the Strategic Defence Review being announced by the Prime Minister. So Yeah, really timely. And Katie, how about yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie again. Thank you so much for having me here today. So at BioOrbit, we're building a pharmaceuticals factory in space. This is manufacturing drugs in space for use on Earth. And the reason as to why space, that seems a bit costly, is that in a microgravity environment, you can form different structures than you can form here on Earth. So you can make new drugs that can be administered to patients differently, and you need space in order to actually make that product. So like a prime use case of this is taking a drug that typically you have to inject in the vein and turn it into something that you can self-inject. So through making these drugs in space, patients don't need to go to hospital and spend the time on a bed getting the IV drip. You can stay at home and self-inject. So what we're doing at BioOrbit is building the hardware to mass produce these drugs so that it makes sense and we can use it and we can, here on Earth, exploit and benefit from those different structures you can make.
Yeah, I love that. And what you've described is no mean feat. There's a massive undertaking of so many different moving parts. And to put it into context, if you think about SpaceX, like they're there to solve the challenge of transportation, but you're solving much more than that. And you've got 2 launches coming up this year.
Yes.
Amazing. Could you tell us more about them and what they're focused around?
Sure. So thank you, Anushka. So there are a lot of questions that we have to answer before we can make something in space and then inject it into humans. So we've got a few questions that we're answering this year, which I'm really excited about. One is to check to see how crystals survive when they are brought back down to Earth. So is there any change when it goes through and experiences that temperature change with the heat on re-entry and that impact when it hits the ground? Is there any damage to the product? So that's test 1. And then we're testing, the second test is on the space station itself. We're sending up our proof of concept manufacturing line. So from this and the learnings from the 2 of them, we can then make our next generation system, which will be able to scale up the production of these drugs.
I mean, amazing. And think about, the C word touches so many of our lives, and to know that there are future technologies that will make that treatment pathway for humans on Earth like so much more comfortable in the privacy of their home is like so wonderful to see. And Bianca, tell us more about your work, because you've evolved into an environmental intelligence platform. And obviously you've mentioned the defense aspect, and for some of the audience, you might not know, but dual use is the terminology we use for space being not only a domain for technology and the economy, but also the defense side of it. And so I think that's an area that you're pivoting or are very much into at the moment. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so absolutely. And this is, again, it's something that in a way you take advantage as a founder or a technologist. You understand that there is a need, and then you move your technology to serve that purpose. So this is pretty much what we've done. So we've launched our first payload in January, and it's now orbiting around us and it's giving us data.
Hang on a second, let's take a minute. You have a satellite in orbit around our planet right now.
Yes.
I mean, amazing.
It's literally giving us, it's less amazing when you see the Excel file coming with just like a bunch of data and you're like, this is really not cool. but it's working. So we launched it there in January. And we realized that some of the elements that we are detecting, which is, again, radiation on a low Earth orbit, are the ones that, again, could be radiation made not by, let's say, a peaceful actor in space. And when it comes to constellations, satellites for military operations, or again, defense assets, you need to understand these data and how it impacts your situational awareness. So there is the in-space operations that are extremely important, and you need to understand what's happening and really, again, what kind of radiation, because probably you don't know, but we've read about the Russians just exploding one of their satellites in space and creating debris and also all sorts of other, again, elements that are going to affect our own operations. Even if you think about Starlink or anything that we use on an orbit for broadband and telecommunication, all of that could be affected by radiation or electromagnetic interference that has been created in space. So that's pretty much the one element that we realized it's extremely important for commercial operations. Again, broadband is extremely commercial, but it's super important to understand threats attribution based on the environments and, again, the the non-natural elements that are happening in space right now, so that you don't have jamming, you don't have spoofing, you don't lose connection, you don't lose GPS in areas that are extremely needy when something is happening and you don't even know what kind of operations you have to do on ground. So it was an interesting way of seeing, but I think also the beauty of space technology is that it can have different purposes. So it's very interesting for us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing about the dual use aspect, and Katie, for you as well, like if you're creating a novel medicine in the domain of space, then obviously you've got the situational awareness of understanding the risk of debris, which we're learning so much more about at the moment, but also what are the implications for yourself as someone who's going to be manufacturing medicine in space? How does that tie into that?
Yeah, it's true. I think the grand aim for us, I mean, this is a few years down the line, sure, but we would want to have our own space station, which is just all of our manufacturing lines and people maintaining that. So you do have to be aware, okay, if you're subjecting humans to this radiation in these space stations for long periods of time, how does that affect the body? And there's a whole load of research on that, mainly by the astronauts on the space station at the moment, assessing their bodies when they come back down. So there's a lot of work there, but it's definitely a multifaceted problem.
No, I agree. And we live in the duality of this moment right now, because on one side, we're often asked, why space? And then aren't there more pressing problems here on Earth? On the other side, we're deep in the trenches, building startups, connecting the community, debating on the regulation, geeking out over orbital debris clauses, and spending late nights bartering launch slots is some of the stuff that we've discussed behind the scenes. And the costs of building the teams to execute these visions, driven by the impact and the alignment of what we're trying to build with these missions. And this is a tension that we live with, right? Like, why do you bother? But space is also seen as like a billionaire's playground, right? It's kind of a boys' club, and in a way, hopefully this is a testament that there is more to the space sector than Bezos and Musk and Branson. But I'm really struck by the community that I see in the London Space Network. It really echoes every facet of our community, of society, and we need that for the space sector. I would love to ask you both, what's a myth that you would like to bust about the space sector that you would love to bust? And I guess, Katie, you built your startup from a shed or a garage, depending on who you're talking to. Could you tell us about that as well?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say there are two things that I think we kind of get wrong in the space industry. I think one is that you have to be a billionaire to start a space company. I think the way that the space industry is changing and the way that the infrastructure is being built means that you don't need to have all of that upfront cost to build the infrastructure. BioOrbit was started with me in my room and a team building our first prototype in a garage, and it worked. And that was the starting steps for it, and then have to get investment and grants to obviously take it to the next level. But you don't need that as a starting point. And I think the second thing, and this is more how I see the space industry going, is that Bianca and I, our companies are very, very different. We serve completely different sectors, and we're both lumped in, you're a space companies. But actually, we're completely different companies with different sectors that we're addressing. And it's you wouldn't say all companies on Earth are Earth companies. So you have to think about it a bit differently. So Bianca, it's going information, defense. I'm in the biotech area. So I think in time we'll see it shifting more to biotech that uses space, intelligence that uses space. So I think that's another myth.
Yeah, and I always love that Estee Lauder put their advanced night repair serum in the ISS and paid for astronaut time to take photographs of that product. So the commercial opportunities are also there right now. And how about yourself, Bianca? What myths would you like to bust?
Yeah, so I was laughing when you were reading the question because I said, how controversial can I go right now? I think media has done a terrible job and depicting what space is about and who contributes to space. And yesterday I was literally writing a speech I need to give this week in Italy. And I was really pissed off about the idea that space again is just a new warfare, and it's another way of another way of creating differences, or moving to space, moving to another orbit or another level, the space and the differences that we see on Earth. And for me, and this is probably a myth that needs to be busted. And I'm a rocket scientist, and I keep saying that space is not just for rocket scientists. Because if it's just rocket scientists, we're going to repeat the same mistakes we've done over and over and over again. We need artists, we need philosophers, we need thinkers, we need writers, we need everybody, the collective that's actually picturing a future in space that is not just functional from an engineering degree, that is really making humanity live or dream or see something beyond ourselves. So that's the first thing, that's the first myth. It's not just engineering, just let's stop it.
Yeah, I love that.
That's the other one. And then the other one is, again, it's definitely about, the capitalism of all of this. It's extremely capital intensive, as we know it. But I think even with Katie, we have demonstrated that collaboration really goes a long way rather than competition. Honestly, we shared so much, like the office and the engineers, everything. Like we've helped each other so much in these past few years, and we will keep doing that. And I think that in the moment, people will understand that there is a piece of the pie for everybody, because again, we are extremely different. We're going to go a lot farther and including a lot more opinions in space, rather than just sending another, phallic thing into space and think, oh, this is bigger than yours. So, I just don't think that's the way. I think that everybody should see the beauty of space in a way that's, again, it's a dream. And the dream is not for a very few people, it's for everybody.
And it's so true, because also on the science aspect, so much hasn't been solved yet. So if there are any problem solvers in the room, you don't have to be tech native, right, to ask questions. There's a reason why you're all here this morning. You're a curious person. I mean, some of you might want to be an astronaut one day. I know I wanted to be one, like back in the day. If you wanted to be an astronaut, or do you still want to be one, raise your hand just so we can see who we're working with. Amazing, that's like a third of the room. And so this is it, like space is not only inspiring, it drives us to build technology and solutions that help us on this planet, and maybe it will help us where we might shoot to in the future. And I guess with that, like I'd love to talk a bit more about the future and where it's going, because I think most of you in the room really want to get into the nitty-gritty of like, where are we going to be in 50 years' time, right? Are we going to be on the moon? Are we going to be on Mars? Are we going to be on a moon of Jupiter? There was one that was announced yesterday that actually looks like the Death Star by some fluke of nature. Like, who knew where the inspiration came? But fast forward to 50 years from now, what do you think the role of space will play in our lives?
It's an amazing question. And I will start by saying that space technology has already played a massive role in our life. Sometimes we don't think about how much we're using space technology on a daily basis, but even just sharing a selfie on Instagram, it's using space technology. Or having a Zoom call is actually, or any bank transfer that we're doing through an app or Apple Pay, it's actually using space technology. So all of that has already changed our life. But in the next 50 years, and I want to be more, I'm an optimist by default, or I wouldn't be a founder.
Yeah.
I want to go more utopia stage. And first of all, I think that I'm in love with biotech, by the way. I don't do that, but I love it. And I think that humans are definitely going to have a lot more activity in space, whether they are going to settle somewhere, whether they are going to leave or open a store or sell something or have, a festival in space, potentially. But I also think that space technology is actually going to solve many problems that we haven't really been able to solve on ground, like, for example, tech. Another one that I'm really passionate about, and I think it will be really the future, is this, and again, we're going really sci-fi now, is this join between human and machines, but not in a way that is disconnected or is dystopian, in a way whereby some materials that you have produced in space could actually be used to make humans more of a superhero. If you have a disability, if you're really sick or whatever, something that has happened in space and has been used for people in space in the harshest environments can actually make you a better human on Earth. And I don't think that humans biologically are able to adapt as fast as we can to be in space. So I definitely see a machine-human connection as a cyborg going to space. But that's just me dreaming about sci-fi.
No, and it's interesting, you know, we talk about robots going to build initially, like some of the early stages as we go back to the moon and also Mars, and that's because of cost of human life. No space agency, no government, no private actor would put humans at risk in that first instance. And there's some brilliant articles and research. There's a guy called Professor Chris Mason who wrote a book around the next 500 years of engineering human life to live off Earth. And he comes up with this great concept that we as humans care not only about us as a species, but all of the plants and the flora and the fauna and preserving that with us. Because there will come a time at some point in our future where our Earth burns out, right? So in a way, like that's why people like Elon, when they talk about this bold vision for Mars, he's really thinking about really far in the future. But it is potentially a reality that at some point, our future generations are going to start to really be worried about. But this is where this foundation is being laid down now with the work you're doing. So how about yourself, Katie? How does the future look for you?
I think it's a great question, because I always think, okay, let's think 50 years ago. What was happening 50 years ago? And so if we think about it, 56 years, if I've got my maths correct, ago was when we landed on the moon. And if you go back just a few years prior to that, it was just like a couple of satellites. And it seemed ridiculous at that point when it was like, okay, we're going to put humans on the moon. It was just like, this is impossible. And lots of people believed it was impossible to happen. But that changed. And that was like, okay, so then what we demonstrated was what humans are capable of doing when they work together and you bring all of these minds together, which I always find like so inspiring. So I think what we're and they probably then would never think about what we're doing now, because now we're like SpaceX are launching what, every week, every 2 weeks? And so if you said that to people 50 years ago, they'd be like, oh, what? That's crazy. We've spent 10 years to get this one thing flying or anything. So I think, okay, so think ahead. In the way that I see it is that we are going to be even more dependent on space. I think we're already so dependent, as Bianca touched upon. I think we're going to see many more humans living in space, and I don't mean just like for holiday or casually. It will be for using space. So like maintaining the equipment. So when I think about what we're doing, I was like, we will want, at that point, many factories in space. And it's like, that's just routine. It's part of the supply chain. Why shouldn't it be? And so I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think we'll see data centers in space, and that's very commonplace. I do think in 50 years we'll have humans on Mars, which I really hope I'm alive to see. But yes, so I think that is what will be a multi-celestial body species. But I do think that we won't question it. It'll be like, oh yeah, space, cool.
It's so funny you talked about like the 50-year aspect of like, I guess, our mortality, because so many of the scientists I work with at the University of Leicester, for instance, are very close to retirement age, and what they've built has got us to where we are. And I'm incredibly lucky to work with those scientists. You have an academic background, you're very technical in your background and your expertise as well. And you know, when you were talking about humans going to space, like, we don't know what superpowers our own genetics have for us, because different genes switch on and off. And that's why it's really cool that we have a European Space Agency British Paralympian who's been chosen as the first Paralympic astronaut with ESA, John McFall. And his story is so compelling because hopefully it shows everybody and anyone who's interested in space that it is for everyone, and it should be accessible and it should be inclusive, because every single one of you, as Bianca and Katie have defined here today, they've really stated how much it will reflect on your daily life, but also your contribution into it. And I know that my motivation was to ensure that it was to be part of the conversation today, to try and influence how it was being built, because we all know how algorithms are locking us into certain functionality in software. What we don't want is the hardware aspect of that. Once we build these systems, right, we need to be situationally aware of what's happening. What is the risk to your medicine that's being produced in space? What is the, are you the future TomTom of navigating space debris, right, to get to a different part of an orbit? The challenge is there, and I really ask you, the creative audience, to really think about what you could contribute to that. And I guess in closing, Katie, you always talked about like seeing this wave coming towards you as you thought about moving from academia. How did you both move into this sector? Like, what brought you into this?
Sure. I'd say that for me, always loved space, definitely wanted to be an astronaut, still do, will happily admit that. And there was a particular book that made a difference to my mindset, which is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if anyone's read it. But he spoke at one point about, it was talking about the tech boom and the people who had really made a big difference at that stage. And it's sort of redefining like what success is in terms of its timing, there's a lot of luck element to it. It's not just down to that like individual themselves. And it said that at the time of the tech boom, certain people were a certain age that enabled them to take risks more than others. And I just thought at that point, well, what's the wave that's coming now? Like what waves are moving that's completely outside of my control, that's like in humanity, and space is one of them. With SpaceX changing the game, launch costs going down, it's like, okay, this is changing. So many more things are going to be possible that weren't possible just a few years ago. And that was one thing I was like, okay, I have to jump now, because if I wait 5 years, too late.
It's funny because I always say you're early and late to join the space sector, so don't let that deter you, because there are future careers, there are companies that haven't even been imagined yet. We talk about that with AI and quantum as well. Like, there are career pathways that we don't even know what they are yet. Bianca, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think space chose me before I chose space. Let's say that. I've been, when I started studying astronautical engineering, and it was more than 20 years ago, there was no commercial space available. So even at the time when I joined uni, everybody was like, what for? What's the point? But I kind of knew that there was a point to that. And then as I moved through the industry, one of the point was, in fact, one of my very first mission, I was the youngest there, which was crazy. It was a Martian mission that went to Mars in 2018, discovered the water under Mars 2 years ago. And that was really my launch pad to space. And I just realized that it had become more of a vocation for me, like a calling, because again, you realize that space technology is one of those places where, let's say, if on Earth the big rooms and the boardrooms were already taken and decisions were already made, the next playground for making huge decisions for the entire humanity was going to be space. Yeah. And if we wanted to make a change, I personally wanted to be in those rooms. I didn't want to just accept decisions made by someone else for a technology that was going to change my life. So I decided to stay there, and so it was more of a love letter to humanity rather than technology, but I'm also a massive nerd, and I love engineering, and I found a problem that really needed to be solved. So that's been my last 15 years in space.
I love that. So there is something really poetic about being here at South by Southwest London to talk about space, because it's always been about what's next, as I said, and space is that next frontier, not in the distant cinematic sense, but in the gritty engineering, policy wrangling, startup scaling, code writing, community building sense. In my work, I horizon scan and look at the future 20, 30 years from now, particularly projecting technology, missions, and talent that shape the future in academia. I really hope that today's panel has highlighted that space is not just all about exploration, it's about infrastructure, industry, stewardship, and for me, and I think all of us, inclusion and accessibility. If you're in the room, you're already part of that community that's rolling up its sleeves and helping to shape what the future looks like. So we're not just dreaming of the stars, we're shaping and designing the rules, the systems, and the supply chains that will get us there responsibly. You never know who you might meet today, or what idea might take root from this room. I came to South by Southwest 9 years ago in Austin, Texas, winning a competition, and that's where I met two NASA astronauts. They've both been to space since, and one of them, Vic Glover, is an Artemis II, and he is going to be orbiting the moon in our very near future. So today, I'm here with these brilliant visionaries who are shaping that future for space. This is your moment, whether you're working in code, design, content, or climate tech, space needs you. Most of all, I want you to think about how you can build into our space sector one that works for everyone and not just the few. Please join me in thanking our incredible panelists, Katie and Bianca, and thank you for being with us this morning.